Exposed. Racist cop shocks. Everyone when he discovers his boss is an amazing black woman. John Thompson stormed through the precinct, the weight of his badge feeling heavier every day. The quaint town of Cedar Grove, Ohio, with its charming storefronts and warm-hearted neighbors, felt more foreign to him than ever. The news echoed in his mind. Chief Angela Carter, a fierce black woman, had been appointed as the new head of the department. To John, this felt like an affront, a challenge to his lifelong belief that law enforcement was a line drawn in black and white. The way she commanded attention, confidence radiating off her every word, unsettled him deep inside. How could she possibly understand the gritty realities of policing? His thoughts spiraled. A racing whirlwind of uncertainty and resentment. John clung to his reputation, a hard-nosed cop who enforced order above all else. But in the quiet moments, those shadows crept in, unveiling doubts he burrowed deep within. He couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that this woman was about to unravel everything he thought he knew about authority. Frustration churned within him, mingling with an unease he couldn't shake. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days turned into weeks, each moment growing more suffocating. He observed Angela engage with the local black community, the very people he'd viewed with dismissive disdain. Their stories of hardship and resilience opened up cracks in his hardened exterior. He still scoffed at her progressive ideas, believing in the sanctity of the badge above all else. But as he witnessed families struggling, he felt the pulse of societal pain beneath the surface of Cedar Grove, one he had never truly acknowledged. The pressure mounted when the inevitable clash occurred. A local teenager died during a routine stop gone wrong. John was at the center of that storm, thrust into the spotlight as the community's anger boiled over. He felt betrayed by the badge, the responsibility morphing into a relentless weight on his shoulders. The criticism cut deeply as he grappled with the implications of his actions. He wasn't just a cop anymore. He was the embodiment of everything his community feared. With Angela pushing for accountability, John found himself cornered. Could he stand behind his previously unyielding beliefs and risk losing everything? Shadows of doubt dove into his mind, gnawing at him as he put on a brave front. Every glance from the angry townspeople felt like daggers aimed at his soul. His stomach twisted in knots as he caught sight of the young boy, once an eager admirer, now questioning John's goodness. In that moment of heart-wrenching clarity, John faced an unbearable anguish. He was the enforcer, yes, but at what cost? Standing at the precipice, the lines between duty and humanity blurred, leaving him gasping for breath. The question lingered. Could he change enough to bridge the chasm he had helped create? As the walls closed in around him, John sensed that a choice loomed just ahead. One that could redefine not only him, but an entire community poised for transformation. Days fused into a haunting fog of disillusionment, each moment amplifying the intensity of John's internal battle. He paced in the precinct's dimly lit break room, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above him, punctuating his spiraling thoughts. The coffee he poured was bitter, much like his emotions. John was aware that he needed to confront not just the town's anger, but his own suffocating bias. But how? The image of the teenager lingered like a ghost. Dirt-laced shoes forgotten on a porch, a football left to collect dust. These remnants of a life lost clawed at him. John knew he could not continue pretending he was merely a cog in the system. His badge felt like a masquerade now, disguising the weight of his responsibility. This was not merely professional, it was deeply personal. He sought Angela out, torn between resentment and an unspoken desire to understand. She sat at her desk, poring over community feedback, each comment a reminder of the trust that needed rebuilding. For the first time, John noticed the fierce determination etched into her brow, the way a single bead of sweat traced her temple as she fought against the dwindling patience of those she served. "Chief Carter," he began, his voice steady yet strained, "can I speak to you?" She looked up, surprised but intrigued. "Of course, Officer Thompson. What's on your mind?" "About everything. The protest last week. The teenager. His words stumbled, but he pressed on. "I know I need to listen." Angela's gaze sharpened, a glint of hope shimmering behind her usually guarded demeanor. "Listening is a good first step. It's not easy, but John, understanding begins with vulnerability." She invited him to sit down, a gesture that felt foreign yet grounding. He could feel the remaining tension in the air, thick and charged. "Why do you think you struggle with this?" Angela challenged gently. Taking a breath, John plunged into a self-examination he had long avoided. "I thought hierarchy defined respect in this job, but now everything feels shaky. Hierarchy is meant to serve the community, not control it. You've got to ask why you feel so threatened," she insisted, her voice soft yet unwavering. Her words hung in the air like a bright light in an underground tunnel. John realized she wasn't confronting him. She was giving him a choice. He wrestled with resentment. Part of him clung to the notion of power dictated by the badge, while another part recognized a growing curiosity to rewrite his narrative. That evening, instead of retreating to his usual routines, John found himself walking the streets of Cedar Grove, camera in hand. A documentary student from the local college had uploaded a project highlighting the community's stories, and as he observed the resilience of individuals through the lens, he started to feel a shift, fragile yet undeniable. Each interview unfolded layers of humanity he had ignored. For so long he had been a civil servant, but now he questioned whether he had truly served his purpose. Was it too late to reassess what it meant to protect and serve? Motivated now, John's resolve hardened. He would not let fear anchor him. He would engage. But as he returned to the precinct, a thought stalked him. Would his colleagues even allow him to change? Doubts flooded back, swirling in the shadows of his mind. He noticed resentment brewing in the eyes of his fellow officers. Whispers about Angela's influence danced through the precinct like a pathogen, wrapping around them in an infectious grip. John felt the weight of that expectation coil around him. He had taken a step towards understanding, yet the road ahead seemed fraught with challenges. The time had come to face not just the opposition within himself, but the looming confrontation among his peers. Could he emerge from this crucible of transformation without losing everything? As he delved deeper into himself, pondering the complex layers of his identity, John understood one truth. Change wouldn't come simply from recognition. It would require him to challenge and confront those around him and himself as he fought to redefine his purpose. The next morning would bring a crucial decision. The question posed itself anew. Could he risk everything to forge a new path? The dawn broke over Cedar Grove with a muted glow. John stood in front of the precinct, the air thick with expectation. Today he would act, and with every breath he felt the weight of that looming decision pressed down on him. Yesterday's street encounters echoed in his mind, stories filled with struggle and resilience, all the faces he had failed to truly see until now. What was it about change that terrified him so? Perhaps it was the prospect of losing the comfortable certainty that came with conformity among his colleagues. He had built a persona around the belief that authority was synonymous with respect, But the rising tide of awareness within him whispered a different truth, one that nudged him towards uncertain grounds. As the precinct filled gradually with the morning bustle, John searched for Angela before the shift began. He needed to discuss a plan, to vocalize his intent of reaching out to the community. The idea both exhilarated and terrified him. Would it be met with support or rejection? Uncertainty gnawed at him, an anxious reminder of the fragile line he was walking. "Good morning, John," Angela greeted, her tone warm, but with an underlying current of scrutiny. She had sensed the shift in him since their last conversation. "Morning, Chief. Can we talk?" The tremor in his voice betrayed his resolve. Angela nodded, leading him to a quieter corner of the precinct. "What's on your mind?" "I want to start engaging with the community," he declared, the words spilling forth. "I know there's a lot of distrust, and I'd like to help bridge that gap." Her expression softened, pride glimmering in her eyes. "That's a fantastic start, but be prepared for pushback, especially from your peers. Not everyone will welcome your change, John." The gravity of her warning hung between them. John nodded, understanding the challenge ahead. His colleagues were as entrenched in their views as he had been just days ago. Yet he felt an undeniable stirring within him, a newfound passion that demanded recognition. Determined to push through the resistance, John sought out fellow officers during their morning briefing. The atmosphere was thick with skepticism as he stood before them, the room filled with familiar faces he had once allowed to dictate his approach to his job and to life. "Hey everyone," he began, his hands trembling slightly. "I know things have been rough lately, and there's been a lot of talk about change. I want to be a part of that. I want to connect with the community and understand their perspectives better." A cacophony of disdain met his proclamation, eyes narrowing. Officer Dunn scoffed. "And what's that supposed to accomplish? You think you're going to be some kind of savior or something?" John's heart raced as he faced evident scorn. "I'm not trying to save anyone, Dunn. I just want to listen. Maybe we can learn from each other." The tension hung heavy, laughter peppering the edges of their taunts. Yet there was a sliver of silence as some faces reflected curiosity. He noticed a few newer officers willing to engage with his idea, while others remained entrenched in their disbelief, their commitment to the status quo palpable. Angela's presence loomed behind him, a silent support amplifying his courage. "Change doesn't happen in isolation," she spoke up. "It requires action and the willingness to step outside your comfort zone. Perhaps engage with those voices you've avoided." John sensed her belief in him rekindling a flame within. It was uncomfortable, the push against the tide of negativity and scorn, but beneath the fear was a burgeoning strength he had denied himself. He realized he was transforming not only for himself, but for those who deserved better. With the briefing ending, instead of retreating back to the shadows, John approached those few who had shown curiosity. "Let's discuss how we can start engaging with the community," he proposed. Their initial hesitance gave way to dialogues igniting possibility. The day was long, but the exchanges sparkled with hope, illuminating the dark tendrils of doubt lingering in the precinct. Change was slow and arduous, yet in each conversation, John discovered pieces of himself he didn't know existed, a willingness to challenge, to confront, and to transcend. As he left the precinct that night, he felt a newfound rhythm pulse through him. It was uncertain and raw, yet the fear that overshadowed him only days ago began to dissipate. Perhaps hope could be forged within the confrontation, but questions remained. Would those in authority support him, or would they continue to resist his shift toward engagement? The thought circled in his mind like a hawk, sharply observing, waiting to plunge. Could any path forward truly hold transformative power when surrounded by echoes of dissent? The next morning, an unsettling energy hummed within John as he entered the precinct. It was as if the walls themselves vibrated with both skepticism and anticipation. Yesterday's conversations lingered, whispers of possibility mingling with shrouded doubt, making it hard to breathe comfortably. The patrol room was practically buzzing, and the subdued chatter felt like a gauntlet he was now obliged to navigate. To the casual observer, he was still John, the dedicated officer, but to him, every moment felt like a test, a trial by fire where the flames were not evident, but nonetheless seared. Could he really advocate for change in an environment seemingly hell-bent on the status quo? He flicked through various scenarios in his mind, each more daunting than the last. "Ready for your next bold move?" Dunn's voice slithered into his thoughts, dragging him back to the present. There Dunn stood, leaning against the wall with crossed arms, his judgment heavy in the air. "Let's see how far your newfound engagement takes you," he sneered, eyes glinting with challenges unspoken. John clenched his jaw, reluctant to show his discomfort. "It's not a game, Dunn. It's about building trust." Dunn snorted, his smirk widening. "Trust? What's that to the likes of us?" The comment struck a chord deep within John. They were entrenched in a system that glorified bluster over understanding, yet he knew he was becoming something different. He was not the same officer who shied away from conflict or placed blind faith in authority. With a newfound resolve festering in his chest, he met Dunn's gaze firmly. "Why don't you join us?" John proposed, a hint of defiance coloring his words. "I'm meeting with some community members later. Maybe you could learn something about those you claim to protect." Dunn's expression faltered momentarily, but quickly morphed into condescension. "I'll believe it when I see it, John." Ignoring the jab, John turned from Dunn, a sense of urgency propelling him forward. He found Angela in her office, poring over papers. She looked up, a welcoming smile lighting her face, momentarily easing the tension in his chest. "Good morning. Ready for your big day?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with a mix of encouragement and caution. "I need your help," John replied, diving into his request without preamble. "I want to organize an informal meet-up with the community. You have connections, and they might respond more positively if they see us united." Angela's brow furrowed for a moment. "That's a significant leap. Are you prepared for the reactions of those in your circle?" The question hung like a pendulum, swinging between doubt and conviction. John realized that his desire for connection outweighed his fear of reprisal. "I have to try," he said, voice steadying with determination. "For us, for them. It's time we stop seeing the lines drawn in the sand as immutable barriers." Angela nodded thoughtfully, then began jotting down names and connections. "I'll help facilitate, but you'll need to lead. Remember, change begins with the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths." Just as the discussion turned to logistics, Officer Martinez entered, curiosity etched on his face. "What's going on?" "John's organizing a community meeting," Angela explained. Martinez raised an eyebrow, skepticism lining his tone. "And you think they'll show?" "Why wouldn't they?" John countered. "They need to know we care. For too long we've been seen as unapproachable." The silence in the room thickened, filled with an unspoken question. Was he truly ready for this? In that moment, the weight felt as heavy as an anchor, tethering him to his past. As the hours crawled by, John absorbed the lingering doubt of his colleagues while bolstering his resolve. Each new understanding was marred by the remaining voices of dissent, but the more he engaged, the louder the voices of support became, transforming a chorus of uncertainty into a burgeoning symphony of hopeful change. His focus turned to the clock, its hands creeping closer to the designated time for the community meeting. He could already imagine the room, faces illuminated by the light of anticipation, contrasted with shadows of fear and resistance. What would await him on the other side of that door? Would he stand alone against the tide of disapproval? Or would someone finally grasp the hand of possibility he extended? As John gathered himself, heart pounding, he questioned whether he had the fortitude to transcend everything he once accepted as his truth. The moments ahead were ripe with confrontation. The time had come to face whatever lay waiting beyond the threshold, maybe even the most daunting adversary of all, himself. John stood just outside the meeting room, the threshold a literal and metaphorical barrier that separated his past from a future he desperately wanted to shape. The cacophony of voices inside fluctuated. In those moments, anxiety gripped him tightly. With every breath, he felt the weight of expectations, both his own and those of his colleagues, pressing down on him. The clock ticked ominously on the wall, each second a reminder of the responsibility that was now his. He spotted his reflection in the glass pane of the door, clad in his uniform but feeling anything but the stalwart officer he'd often projected. Was he ready to confront the complex realities of the community he'd long misunderstood? Or would he falter under the scrutiny of those who had every reason to mistrust him and his intentions? As he hesitated for the last few moments, a rush of determination surged within him. It was time to abandon the safety of complacency and step into the rawness of vulnerability. He pushed the door open. The room stilled as he entered, eyes turning toward him, a wave of mixed emotions washing over the faces before him. Some wore skepticism, others curiosity, but he sensed a few flickers of hope. The diversity of the group was striking, and he could feel the weight of his badge as a symbol of both authority and alienation. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, finding the strength in his own voice. "I know that my uniform doesn't inspire a lot of trust, but I want to change that." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The atmosphere thickened with tension. He noted a woman at the back, her arms crossed and brow furrowed, waiting for him to falter. "This isn't about the police showing up to tell you what we think you need. It's about listening, truly listening to what you have to say." The skepticism in the room did not shift immediately, and he felt himself teetering on the edge of failure and hope. What had he expected? He didn't deserve trust merely by speaking the words. He realized that gestures weren't enough. He must embody change in every interaction, every encounter. As he continued, he began to ask open-ended questions, inviting stories rather than presenting positions. He facilitated a conversation rather than leading a monologue. The stories unfolded like a tapestry woven with pain, mistrust, and the flickering light of community resilience. Insights emerged, some of which stung as they mirrored his own failures. He retained his posture, aware that to show regret would be to risk disconnection. Moments passed, and a shift began to envelop the room. The woman with her arms crossed slowly unfolded them. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was steady, but had an undercurrent filled with conviction. "What will you do about it?" A wave of challenge met him, a stark reminder that this was about far more than individual words. Internally, he grappled with her question. What action was he prepared to take? "We're here to talk," he replied, gauging the audience's reactions. "But we must also commit to action. I want this to be a start." Their skepticism hung like fog, thick yet shifting, but he sensed a crack forming. This meeting could pave the way towards something real, but it required more than dialogue. It demanded a promise of transformation from both sides. It meant confronting himself as much as the system. An unexpected voice broke through his thoughts. "Talk is cheap, officer. We need to know that you'll be part of the solution, not just lip service," a younger man asserted, resolute. In that instant, John understood the gravity of his platform, not just his position, but the inherent responsibility that came with it. "I will stand by my word and work to earn your trust," he committed, emphatically. His heart raced as he spoke, aware that the moment hung precariously in the balance. They needed not just to hear his vows, but to witness them in action. The room continued to pulse with tension, yet something intangible began to shift. It became evident that this was only the beginning. Internal doubt transformed into a flicker of determination. The real confrontation was with himself and the vows he would have to keep. As the meeting concluded, applause erupted, mingled with lingering skepticism. He felt a sense of accomplishment, but deep down, he knew the greater challenge lay ahead. The journey toward gaining true respect and trust within this fractured relationship was still ahead, and it would be fraught with challenges and setbacks. John took a deep breath. One foot had stepped forward, but the road ahead was steep and uncertain. Would he truly embrace the burden of real change, or would he revert to the safe narrative of an officer steeped in tradition? The stakes had never been higher, and as voices filled the room with dialogue, he felt the perilous stirrings of doubt returning. Could he really trust himself to navigate this new course within both his professional life and the rugged terrain of his own evolving identity? The lingering applause faded into an awkward silence, and John stepped from the meeting room, his mind racing. The faces of the audience still haunted him, skeptical, yet some glimmered with tentative hope. It was puzzling, invigorating, and terrifying all at once. Now, as he walked the sterile corridors of the precinct, he felt the weight of his decision land heavily on his shoulders. He headed toward his office with increasing urgency. There was much to process. Sitting at his desk, he glanced at the stack of papers detailing ongoing investigations. A stark reminder of the duties he had to juggle alongside these new commitments he had made. His thoughts lingered on the young man's challenge. Talk is cheap. The palpable energy of the room echoed within him, and he knew that it wouldn't be enough to merely speak of change. He had to embody it. His hands hovered over the keyboard as he considered his next step. Instead of submitting the usual reports, he decided to draft an action plan. This wasn't about merely addressing concerns and hoping for the best. He needed tangible solutions. He began outlining community outreach initiatives that facilitated conversations between officers and residents, real exchanges that allowed both sides to nurture understanding rather than perpetuate division. But even as he envisioned these programs, self-doubt nagged at him. What if he failed? What if the change he envisioned was simply an idealistic delusion? He shook his head, trying to dispel the thoughts. His mind drifted to the screws of systemic issues he had ignored for too long. Even with earnest intentions, executing change was a daily grind, filled with potential resistance. The very foundations of his profession could push back against his efforts. John's heart sank at the thought of being branded a sellout or facing hostility from fellow officers when he sought their support. Determined not to wallow in uncertainty, he picked up the phone instead. His instinct pulled him to call Sarah, a community liaison he had met during preliminary outreach programs years prior. Her dedication to building bridges between the police and the community had always impressed him, even back when he had chosen to remain aloof and detached. Maybe she could offer guidance or collaborate in drafting effective strategies that extended beyond the surface. "John, it's been a while." Her voice came through clearly, filled with warmth, yet tinged with caution. He wasted no time. "I need your help, Sarah. Things can't stay the same. I've just come from a meeting with community members asking for real change, and I want to be part of that. Can we talk about how we can work together? It's great to hear you're reaching out, but it's going to take more than just intention, John. The conversations are heavy, full of past grievances. Are you prepared for that?" Her words reverberated in John's mind. Would he be able to handle the influx of tough conversations? This wasn't just about him standing in front of the community. It was about dismantling years of mistrust, conflict, and resentment. Yet something stirred within him, a growing resolve to confront the depth of those challenges head-on. "Yes," he replied, steeling his voice. "I want to be prepared to take hard questions and face the uncomfortable truths. I just don't want to do it alone." As they continued to talk, ideas bounced between them, and John's initial apprehensions began to morph into strategies. Solutions began layering into a framework that could translate into real actions. A daunting task lay ahead, but with Sarah's insight, he could work toward dismantling barriers, facilitating dialogue, and nurturing genuine relationships. John gazed around his office, taking in the weight of the badge on his wall, the photographs perched on his desk that captured moments of his life both in personal and professional domains. Each told a story, yet they felt incomplete. They represented a past he had to reconcile with while carving out a new future. Taking a deep breath, he resolved to not let the anxiety of his doubts halt his ambition for authentic change. He had stepped into the room that evening. It was time he stepped beyond those four walls, into the reality of his commitments. But just then, his phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was a familiar name, his superior, Lieutenant Harris. "We need to discuss some upcoming changes at the precinct. Immediate." With those words, John's pulse quickened. The uncertainty of what that meeting would entail hung over him like a cloud. A new phase was brewing, and to navigate it successfully, he would need to address more than just the community. It would involve confronting his own department. The stakes felt elevated. Would he have the courage to advocate for change, not only in the community, but also within the ranks? Was he ready to face his own colleagues, to propose strategies that might meet resistance rooted deep within the institution? The uncertain path ahead shimmered with both opportunity and potential conflict. Determined, he readied himself for the tumultuous days ahead, aware that the moment to face deeper challenges was fast approaching. A sense of foreboding filled the air as John made his way to the conference room. Each step echoed in his mind, a reminder of the impending conversation with Lieutenant Harris. This was no ordinary meeting. It felt monumental, a crux that could tilt the delicate balance of his burgeoning vision for reform at the precinct. He entered the room, greeted by the sterile light overhead, which highlighted the tense seating arrangement. Harris sat at the head of the table, a stern figure poised with authority, flanked by several senior officers whose expressions ranged from mild curiosity to outright skepticism. John took a seat, determined to project confidence despite the tumult brewing within him. "Thanks for coming in, John," Harris began, her voice steady and commanding. "We have pressing issues to discuss. The department has been under fire lately regarding community relations, and I need your insight." John's heart raced. Not only was he stepping into unpredictable waters, but he was also about to navigate the very currents he wished to change. "I appreciate you reaching out, Lieutenant. I've been exploring ways to improve our connection with the community," he replied, trying to assert his commitment. Harris raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? I hope you understand that implementing changes isn't as simple as proposing a few outreach programs. We've carved our path historically, and there's a lot of resistance to new ideas." He realized this was a critical juncture. Her words carried the weight of every hesitation he had felt until now. "I understand," John responded, his voice slightly firmer. "But if we don't address the grievances, that resistance will persist. We need to show the community that we're not just listening, we're acting." A low murmur rippled around the table. Each officer's gaze seemed to weigh heavily upon him, leaving him exposed. The ironic nature of their scrutiny struck him. Here he was, pleading for understanding under the very shadow of the skepticism he hoped to diminish in others. Harris leaned forward, her expression difficult to read. "Look, John, you know I respect your efforts, but leveraging these initiatives means that you'll need allies in this precinct. You'll need to earn their trust, and I'm not sure how they'll respond to your newfound passion. Then let's create a dialogue," he urged, feeling a spark of defiance within him. "We cannot shun tough conversations if we wish to embrace growth. I'm willing to bring whoever is necessary into the discussion, even if it means facing pushback." The silence stretched, thick with contemplation. John's heartbeat quickened. He had just challenged the comfort of the status quo. It was exhilarating, yet terrifying. Harris nodded slowly. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but know this. The resistance you'll face is not just from your colleagues. It extends to people in the community who have seen little change for too long. Are you prepared for that scrutiny and potential backlash? Backlash. The weight of those words hit him with an uneasy realization. He thought back to the anecdotal stories Sarah had shared during their conversation, past grievances that had scarred the community's perception of law enforcement. If he was to embody real change, he had to prepare not only for tough dialogue, but the potential fallout that would accompany his ambition. "I'm willing to take that risk," he stated firmly, realizing that his voice was edged with a conviction he had never fully embraced before. "Very well," Harris said, sitting back considering him. "Here's the plan. I want you to organize a task force focused on these community discussions. You'll need the backing of your colleagues. Speak to them, listen to their concerns, and then bring your findings back here. If you want to earn their buy-in, you must also be willing to address their fears directly." A flicker of hope ignited within him. This was more than an assignment. It was an opportunity to bridge the chasm, not just within the department, but also to begin healing the community. Yet, as that hope welled up, nagging apprehension lurked at the edges of his determination. Walking out of the meeting, John felt a mix of clarity and trepidation. He needed to connect with his peers, many of whom had firmly rooted beliefs that opposing change was a safeguard rather than a hindrance. Could he persuade a group of officers steeped in tradition and likely resistant to any notion that differed from the norm? The office loomed intimidatingly before him. Before he could lose his nerve, he resolved to seek an audience with Officer Thompson, a veteran known for his staunch opinions on law enforcement practices. It was a step toward bringing uncomfortable truths into the light. Yet the thought of Thompson's reputation as a vocal critic of change chilled John's resolve. Could he navigate the conversation with enough divide-and-conquer tactics to ensure that his mission wouldn't crumble before it had a chance to flourish? The stakes felt higher than ever. He had set the wheels in motion, but this was just the beginning. Would he find common ground with his colleagues, or shatter the fragile momentum he had started to build? The moment was ripe for introspection. John's journey into the heart of his colleagues' beliefs was imminent, and with it, numerous hidden conflicts awaited to be confronted. The tempest of change had only just begun. The path forward twisted in ways he could hardly anticipate. John's heart pounded as he plodded towards Officer Thompson's desk, the cacophony of the precinct fading into a distant hum. There was an unshakable certainty that this was not just a conversation, but a confrontation with the past. A confrontation he had prepared for yet anxiously anticipated. The veteran officer was known for his decades of service and entrenched beliefs, acting as an all-too-firm bastion against any reformative ideas. As he approached, John caught Thompson engaged in a heated debate with a younger officer, their voices an indistinct backdrop to his rising trepidation. The older man's thick arms crossed over his chest were a physical barrier that only magnified John's hesitation. He had been warned about Thompson, the smooth-talking skeptic who often veiled deadly sarcasm in his observations. They were both enmeshed in a system that perhaps, under its fractured surface, had the potential for revitalization. "Hey, Thompson, do you have a minute?" John struggled to keep his voice steady, feeling the weight of impending skepticism. Thompson turned, his brow furrowing, as he assessed John with the practiced scrutiny of his years. "What's this about, kid? You're not going to lecture me on some feel-good community program, are you?" The dismissive tone, tinged with condescension, dug into John like a thorn. "Actually, it's about a task force we're setting up for community discussions," John replied, forcing the confidence he hoped would mask the pang of doubt. "I'd really like your perspective. I know you're not a fan of change, but I'm trying to initiate real dialogue about improving our relations." Thompson studied John for an agonizing moment, as if weighing his sincerity against a history of dogged resistance. "A task force? Let me guess, you think PR campaigns can fix decades of mistrust? How naive." No, it's about more than that, John urged, unwilling to retreat in the face of Thompson's skepticism. We need to confront the issues head-on. The only way to move forward is to show that we care and that we're committed to change. A tense silence settled, and John recognized the inner conflict that churned behind the older officer's steely eyes. He considered the vulnerabilities hidden beneath that brash exterior, how he, too, might have navigated the storms of doubt and discomfort in service of greater truth. "Look, I don't know if you're aware," John continued him, "but community trust is critical for our effectiveness as law enforcement. We can't operate in a bubble any longer. We need to be accountable." The flicker of intrigue crossed Thompson's face, quick as lightning before it vanished. "Accountable? Or are you just looking to make a name for yourself? There's nothing glamorous about scrutiny, rookie." John took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of the moment coiling in his chest. "I'm not doing this for recognition. I want to enact real change, for the community and for us as officers. This isn't about making headlines, it's about laying a foundation for trust. But I can't do it if I don't have support. I need you on board." The counter-arguments were poised on Thompson's lips, but there was a slight falter, a hint of recognition. Perhaps it was his own life experience that resonated with John's words. In that split second, John realized this was not merely an exchange about implementation of ideas. It was a delicate dance of finding commonality amid discord. "What if I don't want to play nice?" Thompson challenged, a hint of weariness edging his tone. "Then we both lose," John replied, confidence bolstered by something deeper than anger. It was hope. "This isn't just about feeling good. It's about survival. Our very authority hinges on trust, and we can't build it with the walls we've erected." As the tension surrounding them simmered, Thompson leaned back, an inscrutable expression playing on his face. "You think you can win me over with platitudes, kid? You might want to rethink your strategy." John stepped closer, heart racing. "I don't expect it to be easy, but I hope you can see the value in having these discussions. If people like you don't step up, the cycle of mistrust and division continues, and we become part of the problem." Thompson's gaze softened, albeit momentarily. The wheels of his mind churned, perhaps calculating the ramifications of aligning with the voice of change. It felt like a pivotal moment, not only for John but also for Thompson, an intersection of trajectories that could either converge into progress or remain stagnant in disbelief. As their conversation hung suspended in the air, John understood the battle he faced was as much internal as it was external. He was not merely fighting against traditional values, but striving to reshape a fractured narrative of trust that required collective courage. But what he didn't know was how much the moment would irreversibly change the fabric of their relationship, and if he could enact change, he would have to face the ghosts of the past directly, starting with the next officer who was unyieldingly resistant, Sergeant Matthews. Would he be able to approach Matthews with the same determination, or would fear silence his voice entirely? In the days following his conversation with Thompson, John felt the weight of his ambitions pressing down on him like a heavy shroud. The precinct had a unique rhythm, an odd blend of camaraderie and tension, and with each passing day it became clearer that the progress he sought would require not just courage, but a shattering of long-standing barriers. With renewed focus, he turned his attention to Sergeant Matthews, a figure known for his unwavering traditionalism, a man who had carved out his reputation in the precinct on principles hard as stone. Matthews had a reputation for resisting any inclinations of change, and looked upon John's ambitions with a mixture of suspicion and disdain. "Why are you so eager to stir up trouble?" Matthews snapped one afternoon as John sought to engage him in a discussion about the upcoming task force. The words struck John like a hammer, each syllable echoing against the walls of his resolve. "We've been doing fine as is, haven't we?" That question hung in the air, mirroring John's own doubts. Was he really ready to confront yet another officer who seemed to embody the very stability he was challenging? Nevertheless, John's determination hardened. He couldn't afford to back down. "I believe we can do better," he insisted, invoking the familiar buzz of urgency coursing through him. "It's not about rebellion, Sergeant. It's about adapting. We can't afford to operate on outdated codes when everything around us is shifting." Matthews leaned back in his chair, folding his arms defensively. "You really think a bunch of talks are going to change anything? People won't respect you for playing nice." The skepticism in Matthews' voice was palpable, laden with skepticism grounded in years of experience. The encounter felt like standing in front of a brick wall, brick by brick, a fortress against ideas he knew to be true. Taking a deep breath, John decided to shift his approach. "Look, I understand you've been a part of this system for longer than I've been in the force. But that's precisely why your perspective is invaluable in this task. Change will happen whether we want it or not, but we have a choice. How we adapt to it defines us." For a moment, Matthews's stoic demeanor faltered, a brief flicker of doubt crossing his face. Had John struck a nerve? Or was he only deluding himself into believing that impactful change could come from this unpredictable engagement? "I get it. You want to be the hero," Matthews finally sneered, "but the real world doesn't care about your ideals." John's heart raced. He understood the reality Matthews spoke about. Every day in the field was a reminder of the complexities that left no room for idealism. But beneath Matthews' dismissive facade, John sensed a longing to connect to something larger than rigid guidelines and outdated perceptions. "I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm just trying to be us, better. We have a chance to be proactive instead of reactive. Doesn't that have value?" The words hung between them. John took a step forward, closing the distance, each word carefully calculated in the ever-churning landscape of the precinct politics. Matthews leaned in, now visibly frustrated. "It's not just about you, kid. You're stepping into a battlefield where lives and reputations are on the line. You think you're ready for that?" "I know it won't be easy," John replied, voice steady, daring to confront the fear threatening to cloud his resolve. "But it's about confronting the darkness instead of hiding in it. If we don't wrestle with change, we'll be trapped in a cycle of our own making. I'm ready to face that battle, even if you aren't." The two men stared down, a clash of wills, sparking an unbidden tension in the air. For all the frustrations and fiery exchanges, John felt something shifting. He hadn't won Matthews over yet. Doubt still draped heavily between them like a suffocating curtain. Yet it was a step toward exposure, of vulnerabilities, of conflict, of potential for growth. As John made his way back to his desk, he couldn't shake the feeling that confronting Matthews had revealed more than the old sergeant's resistance. It had revealed John's own evolving understanding of conflict and his role within it. Change wasn't solely about fighting against. It was also about engaging in the struggle of ideas, about exposing his vulnerabilities, his commitment. Could he muster the same tenacity with Matthews as he had with Thompson? Or was he merely flailing against walls of resistance while standing on the precipice of deeper understanding? With determination kindling within him, John knew he would have to navigate the battlefield of his own fears and aspirations, because the next conversation would bring with it the very possibility of belonging, and no longer being an outsider in the precinct. But how would he face the immovable walls that Matthews had not yet shown him? John Thompson's journey through transformation persisted even amidst the tumult surrounding him. Now he was standing taller, aware of his evolving purpose, one that demanded more than surface-level change. His resolve trembled with the understanding that it wasn't merely the officers in the precinct he needed to engage, it was also the very system that had long upheld barriers of distrust and disconnection. As he made his way through the precinct, each corridor echoed with a new melody of determination. John had endured those early flickers of doubt, but now they were diminishing. Instead, clarity became his constant companion, guiding him like a lighthouse as he approached the desk of Sergeant Matthews once more. The air buzzed with expectancy as he remembered the conversation they had left unresolved. This time, he was armed not just with his emotions, but actionable proposals derived from his discussions with the community and fellow officers. A task force framework inspired by their voices, eloquently woven into a vision capable of fostering accountability and understanding. "Sergeant Matthews, can we talk?" John asked, establishing a respectful distance while commanding authority. Matthews, sensing something different in John's approach, nodded. "What have you got now?" "A plan," he declared, his confidence swelling as he laid his ideas before Matthews, a printed outline brimming with actionable items. The framework he shared would allow community members to voice their concerns while giving officers an opportunity for change through dialogue. It was about addressing the differences that had long divided them, but now it was also about embracing the collaboration that could arise from those differences. An expression of intentions? "You'll have to understand these folks won't easily open up," Matthews cautioned, dipping into cynicism. "I know, but that's why it must be authentic," John countered firmly. "I'm asking you to be a part of this, not just because it's a good cause, but because it's a challenge, a way to work through our shared fears." Matthews scrutinized John through narrowed eyes, considering the gravity of the request. "You're suggesting collaboration. Do you honestly think these officers will risk their reputations for a rookie's dream?" John took a deep breath, his insides igniting with a new determination. "That's why I need you. Your experience can guide us through the fear. Together, we can set an example and show growth is a collaborative effort, one we can all benefit from." After a long pause, Matthews leaned back in his chair, the shift in his posture revealing a moment of contemplation. "Okay, Thompson, I'll support your approach, but understand this. It's going to take more than intentions. Talk can break down walls, but it can also ignite resistance if handled poorly. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes," John affirmed with complete assurance. "I'm prepared for everything, scrutiny, pushback, and possible failure, but I believe we can also create mutual respect out of it." As John exited the conversation with Matthews, a tender pulse of hope heaved inside him, intertwining with the understanding of the precarious road ahead. This wasn't just an isolated task force, but the possibility of uniting their department through accountability. They could break chains, explore unfamiliar territory, and dismantle unyielding biases, forging a path towards solution-driven action. Days unfolded, and with each evening John felt a dramatic shift in the precinct, emboldened by Matthews's surprising support. Officers navigated his vision with hesitance, yet a small group began to acknowledge that the walls built over years could indeed be dismantled, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. Enter a pivotal community forum he had planned, a moment where officers would be more than mere enforcers. They would be listeners, positioned to absorb and adapt. Standing at the front, John's heart raced as he prepared to address both officers and community members who had been historically wary. The air crackled with anticipation, and as he stepped forward, John's voice quivered with purpose. "Tonight we're not here to enforce rules. We're here to listen and absorb the stories that make up this community. Every voice matters, every story resonates. There's no growth without discomfort, and I'm asking you all for your trust as we reshape our interactions. Let's create a future together." As the forum unfolded, it proved to be transformative. Community members spoke bravely about their encounters with officers and the nuances of fear and respect. John listened, taking it all in, the discomfort mingling with realization. This was the conversation needed to pave a road toward reconciliation. While it was emotional, there were well-timed pauses that filled spaces with encouragement and aspirations. He witnessed his colleagues transform, some acknowledging their biases openly, As the evening came to a close, applause surged around them, genuine and palpable. Hesitant doubt transformed into hope. Through each rise and fall of the conversation, John demonstrated profound growth. Through vulnerability, he dismantled long-held beliefs, his own and others. Now, there was not just a budding relationship with the community, but also a new understanding evolving within the precinct itself. John left that evening with a solid sense of accomplishment alongside Chief Angela Carter, who had been observing the initiative blossom. Their shared smiles conveyed understanding. Their commitment forged a partnership that defied unexamined practices. At Cedar Grove Precinct, John had arrived at a place that felt like home, where dialogue replaced isolation, trust replaced fear, and where he stood rooted in a newfound true identity, not just as an officer, but as a leader. The final hurdle was in the recognition of transformation, both personal and communal. His badge felt lighter now, encumbered instead by hope and vision for the future. "Keep pushing forward, John," Angela urged, a blend of pride and expectation twinkling in her eyes. With a renewed sense of fulfillment, John understood that transformation often begins with a single story, a story worth telling, worth listening to. He was now part of a narrative where understanding thrived, where change was not just necessary, but possible. So he walked confidently back into the precinct, ready to face the challenges that undoubtedly awaited, determined to embrace every moment, every conversation, and every opportunity to elevate their community. John had not only achieved personal growth, he had become a pivotal catalyst for transformation, and the legacy established from here on would reverberate into the future, creating ripples of change that could last a lifetime. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It really makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. Your insights matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. The power of transformation starts with us.